Pre-use check on a forklift truck. We start with the forks. We check that they're straight and that they're equally spaced. We check along the forks, make sure there's no snags, no denting, and you check them both. Use your foot, not your hand. Check the tips, make sure there's no dents, no loss of shape. Have a look at the heels, make sure there's no cracking on either heel. Follow it up to the top, check the welding on the hooks. And we check the bolts, make sure the bolts are secure and doing their job. And finally, we make sure they're a matching pair by checking the serial numbers are the same. Moving on to the carriage plate. First of all, we look at the shape, make sure there's no collision damage. And we look at alignment with the mast. The gap should be the same. Along the top, on the track, it should be greased and free from rubbish. The castellations should be square-shaped, not rounded, which would show wear. We check the weld points at the corners. And we check the bolts. We then move on to the load guard. The load guard again. Collision damage, we check shape, and we check alignment with the mast. We check the weld points, making sure there's no signs of cracking, and we check the bolts. We now move on to the mast. The main mast, we look at the shape, make sure everything's in alignment, make sure the lines are good. We check the sides, weld points, bottom weld point, check the bolts. In the middle, we check the welds on the crossbeam. We'll then check the welds on the other side, as well as the bolt. Mast rollers, 4 at the top. Damage, we're checking for alignment. We don't want to see any flat spots. The grease line should be prominent. We should be able to see it. There should be no travel and no interruptions. On all 4, and the other 2 inside the sliders. We'll then check the sliders that we can see. We want to make sure they are greased, no signs of scoring, and no rubbish inside. We check that the gaps are equal on both sides. Lift chains. This particular truck has got 3 chains. We're checking the chains are lubricated, not showing any rust, excessive gaps, and that the pins on the sides are securely in place. We want to make sure the chain is going nice and straight up and through the pulley. Check the tension. With the ones on the inside, we compare tensions. These should be equal. Again, we check that they're greased, no signs of rust or damage, and that they're going straight and over the pulleys. We check the rollers, make sure they're showing no signs of damage and that they're rounded. We then check the ends. The securing pins are in place and the bolts are tight. We do this on both sides. Securing pins and the bolts are good. We then might move on to the hydraulics. Hoses first. We'll look at all the hosing, make sure where it needs to be secure, it is secure. We're looking for any leaks, which are more likely to be at the connectors. We don't want to see any fraying, any kinks, any cuts, any signs that it's been getting caught and that it's travelling nice and straight through the rollers. We check all the piping coming down here and either side of the central block, and also for the pipes for the side shift. Make sure there are no leaks. We next check the rams. This is a tilting ram. We want to make sure it's a mirror finish. There are no signs of scratching, no rust and no leaks. Second ram, tilting ram is opposite. Side shifting rams can be found just inside the forks. We can't see much of the lifting rams at the moment because the forks are down, but we can check for leaks at the seals and at the tops. Again, checking for any leaks. We now move on to the rest of the truck, and we start with the wheels and the tyres. In the centre we have the hub. The hub should be damage free and showing no signs of leaking. The bolts should not be able to be loosened by hand. We check the rim for damage, and it should be an equal gap all the way round. The tyre, being a solid tyre, should be free from any foreign bodies like screws, nails. We also check for cracking, we check for holes, and we check for any rubbish that might have got caught behind in the axle area. Then we check the treads, and we have a look at the tyre wear. We need to compare this against its partner tyre on the other side. Any uneven wear may show signs that the tracking is off. Again, we check for rubbish, we check for any foreign bodies, any cracking, any holes. We check the wheel, again the hub, no leaks. Bolts are all good. Rim, no signs of damage, equal gap. Tyres at the back. Check that we've got equal tread on both. Check inside the hub. Check the bolts on both sides. And we don't want to see any rubbish. External condition of the truck. We start by looking at the body. We're looking for any obvious signs of damage, and especially any bends, dents that may cause the vehicle to get caught and may also impede along open lines. We check the counterbalance. We want to make sure it's in alignment. So we check that the gaps on either side are equal. Again, checking along the side, making sure no obvious damage that could catch. We now check the driver's cage. The rollover protection system needs to be in good shape and needs to be damage free, no denting. Stand back, check the shape. Again, check both sides, no denting. Rollover protection system checked. We move on to the falling object protection system. This gains its strength from the weld points. Make sure there's no cracking. Make sure it's good and firm. We check all attachments that are connected. Starting at the front, make sure lights are crack free and securely attached. Good. Driver's position should have 2 bits of information fully visible and readable to the operator. They are the hydraulic labels and the rated capacity plate. You should be able to read the maximum weight capacity, the load height and the load center. Driver's position itself, pedals should have no rubbish underneath. There should be no spillages that could cause slipping, and the grip should be present. The driver's seat should be in good condition. Nothing that could catch on the driver. Check that it can be adjusted and that it locks in place. And it should be fully fitted and not loose. Seatbelt, take it out to its full extent, check along for any fraying, any cuts, make sure the stitching is in good condition, make sure the end piece, the end hoop, is not broken, bent. Place it inside the locking mechanism and test it. That needs to be able to stop you, but make sure it also releases correctly. We're going to climb onto the truck now using 3 points of contact.